Minigames might just be the best tabletop skirmish game for beginning wargamers or experienced players who want to get in a quick game. Because unlike games like Warhammer, the rules are very simple and split into 3 categories: gateway, casual and hardcore. And as you might expect, the game is played with 2 or more small gangs, consisting of a leader, a fighter, a shooter and lastly a healer. And the great thing is, you can use any of the miniatures you already own, as long as they are easily distinguishable into one of these 4 classes. The gateway rules are very simple. Each of the classes I mentioned before has an awesomeness score. This awesomeness score determines how good each of the characters is at fighting, shooting and or healing. Each class also has a set of actions which they can perform in their turn. This set of actions is mostly the same for all characters, except for a few deviations. And each character can only perform 1 action each turn before you move on to your opponent's turn. I'll now go over each of the actions which you can perform in your turn. Firstly, move. Every character can move, and once a model performs this action you can move them 10 centimeters into any direction. Fight. Only a model touching another model can perform this action. When doing so, they must roll a 6-sided die and roll below their awesomeness score to injure the other model. If you injure one of your opponent's models, they are put on their side and are now injured until they are healed by their healer. Crawl. A crawl is basically the same as a move, but can only be performed by injured models. When a model performs a crawl action, they can move 5 centimeters into any direction. Charge. The charge action is a combination of the move action and the fight action. This allows you to get close to the enemy and then attack immediately. Only the leader and the fighter can perform a charge action. Shooting. Only the leader and the shooter can perform the shoot action. When you perform the shoot action, you can target a model within 30 centimeters. And to injure that model, you have to roll above your awesomeness score. However, the target must be visible, otherwise you cannot shoot them. And if the target is partially obscured, they are considered to be in cover. And once a model is in cover, no matter what your awesomeness score is, you can only hit them on a 6. Heal. Only the healer can perform this action. A healer can attempt to heal a model which it's touching. To heal a model, the healer must roll above its awesomeness score, so 3 or higher. If the heal is successful, then the model is no longer considered to be injured and can perform any other normal action. However, do keep in mind that if the injured model used its crawl action to get close to the healer, it can no longer use any other actions this turn. And finally, the objective of the game is to injure all your opponent's models. So it's quite important to protect your healer, because once your healer is injured, other injured models can no longer get back into the game. Do keep in mind that when playing this game you should put some terrain on the table, otherwise models won't be able to hide from the shooter and the shooter will be very overpowered. And lastly, to determine who goes first, simply roll a die, whoever rolls the highest can begin. The models you've been seeing so far while I've discussed the games are the models you can buy alongside the game. Again, you don't have to use these models as you can use any of the miniatures you already own, but I do think these models are quite nice. The casual rules expand upon the gateway rules by adding one simple element to the game, which are cards. You start the game as normal, deploying each gang 40 centimeters apart and then deal 8 of these cards to each of the players. These cards contain things like equipment, strategies and skills which you can give to your characters to enhance their capabilities. For example, one of the equipment cards you can give to your shooter is a sniper rifle, which increases its shooting range from 30 to 40 centimeters. Strategies are cards which you can only give to your leader and he can only use it when he's not injured. And skills can be given to any character. These cards also introduce 2 new concepts, which are grenades and armor. Grenades work like a shooting action. You can give them to any character which can perform a shoot action. Grenades have a range of 15 centimeters. And you can put a marker on a spot where you want to throw the grenade. You then perform the shoot action as normal. If the shoot action is a success, the grenade stays in place and you can look at the cards to know what to do next. If the shoot action fails, however, you have to throw 2 6-sided die to determine how many centimeters the grenade goes into a random direction before the effects take place. You can give grenades to characters who cannot perform the shoot action, but if you do so, the grenade only lands on the chosen spot on a roll of a 6. Additionally, if you throw the grenade to a location which you cannot see, you can only hit on a 6 as well. Armor works as follows. When you give a character armor, they get an armor rating. Whenever a model with armor gets injured, you can roll a 6-sided die, and if you roll below the armor value stated on the card, the model does not get injured. And that's it. Those are the casual rules. Do keep in mind that this might be a bit imbalanced, as some of the cards are way stronger than other cards. Some cards only provide a very small advantage, while some other cards give you an extra life, for example. And this is also represented by the point values on the cards. So if it turns out one of the players has a lot more points on their cards, you can decide to let some of the players swap out some of their lower value cards if they wish. And last but definitely not least, the hardcore rules. The hardcore rules once again expand upon the gateway and casual rules by adding point values to all the cards and the models. This means each player can put together a gang however they'd like, with only leaders, only shooters, only fighters, or maybe even only healers, as long as it is within the predetermined amount of points. The hardcore rules also allow players to play a campaign. This campaign will end after a certain number of games, or a certain number of sessions, or after any other requirement has been met. You can decide for yourself. To spice up the campaign, there's also a bunch of scenarios which you can play. One of these scenarios is grab the loot. In this mode, each player places 2 loot markers on the board, at least 20 centimeters away from their own models. During the game, a model touching a loot marker can use an action to grab this loot. The player left standing or the player who grabbed the most loot markers wins the game. As I mentioned, there's a lot more scenarios and a lot more cards, and you can check them out for yourself in the rulebook. I left a link in the description below to where you can buy the rules for this game.